Watch it, watch it, watch it, because nature does not consist of separate things which you can just pull out like parts from an engine. Take the case of bees and flowers. Fascinating thing about bees and flowers is they are very different looking things. A flower sits still and blooms, and it smells, or stinks to be correct. The bee moves about and buzzes, but they are all one organism. You don't find flowers without bees. You don't find bees without flowers. They are just as much one as your head and your feet, which also look very different. So in that sense, you see, we are one with the incredible complexity of processes upon which we depend. Although to say upon which we depend is not quite accurate, because that separates us from it, as if I were hanging on to a beam and depending on it. It isn't like that. You don't depend on it, because it depends on you. It's a mutual arrangement. And it isn't that one bit of this sort of came first, although that sometimes happens. But it's always there in potentiality, what came later. And so in the same way, there is a simultaneous arrival or evolution of the human organism and the human environment. And thus, biologists speak about the evolution of an environment as well as the evolution of an organism in it. In other words, human beings could not have appeared on this planet until its temperature had lowered to a certain degree, until the atmosphere contained certain gases as a result of vegetative development. And then the environment became evolved enough for human beings to appear in it. Evolved enough? I'll say something further. Intelligent enough for the appearance in it of intelligent beings. For your environment is intelligent. Otherwise you couldn't be. You see, as Jesus said, you don't gather figs off thistles or grapes from thorns. You won't get pears off an apple tree. So, you won't find people except on a people tree. And this planet, this solar system, this galaxy is peopling in exactly the same way that an apple tree apples. Put our existence into verb language as distinct from noun language, and you're much closer to the point. You see, nouns have the difficulty of designating things. Verbs designate process. Now, everything is a process, really. When we speak of housing for houses, matting for mats, we're getting there. The Nootka Indians have a language in which there are no nouns. And so they say, it houses, and then they add an adverb to show whether it houses religiously, homily, or marketingly. And so they see the world as the flow. What is it that houses? What is it that rains when we say it is raining? You see, we always have a funny idea that to get a verb, that is to say to get action, you have to have an agent. Now, this is the most ridiculous idea conceivable. How can a noun start a verb? How can a thing start an event? Because there's no action in a thing. Action can only come from action. Energy from energy. You can't get energy from a concept, because nouns are all concepts. They're abstract, really. It's only verbs that are concrete, because the world is process. Now, common sense insists that the pattern of the world must be made of something, because we still think with Aristotle's common sense, or with the imagery of the book of Genesis, where God made Adam out of the clay. In other words, he made a clay figurine and breathed breath into it, and it became alive. And so we constantly think that we as are made of flesh, as if flesh were some sort of stuff like clay out of which you shape bodies, or like you make tables out of wood. Are trees made out of wood? What a ridiculous question. Trees are wood. They're not made of wood. And it's simply this artifact thing that gives us the idea of the world being made out of something. It isn't made out of anything. And so when physics tries to investigate what is the stuff of matter, they can't find any. Because you can never talk about anything except a process. You can describe what a process is doing. You can describe the structure, the nature of the dance, whether it's doing a waltz or a mazurka or the frog or whatever it is. Then you can describe that melody, shall we say, what it is performing. But there is nothing doing the performing at all. There is no stuff out of which it's being done, because when you examine stuff, you just find more patterns. See, what you mean by stuff is fuzz. When you look at something with a lens and you're out of focus, you see fuzz. But when you come into focus, you see structure. All right, now, the structure is made of all sorts of little lines and things. You can see them, and you want to know what are they made of. So you turn up the magnification, and for a while you get a lot of fuzz, but when you're clear again, you see that those little lines are also made of more little lines, more structure. And big patterns have little patterns upon their backs to bite them, and so on. And that's the way it goes. So suddenly you feel rather insecure, because stuff has disappeared. Now look what's happened. Just look and see what has happened to us. If we go through everything that I've been saying, we find, first of all, that the thing that we thought was I is nothing more than a social institution. just like the equator, or an inch. And to mistake it, to reify it, as Whitehead would say, is the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. It's strictly a hallucination. And any certain amount of psychological self-exploration shows this to be the case. But what we are is the organism. And what the organism is a transactional interchange between the organism and the environment.